How much appeal does the MAGA movement have outside the United States? The Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC. Think of it as a sort of political Coachella for the MAGA movement. It's expanding beyond the US. And now it's come to the UK for the first time with the tagline, Save Britain, Save the West. We've been to CPAC Britain to find out what they mean and whether that message resonates. From the BBC, I'm Tristan Redmond in London. Welcome to The Global Story on YouTube. Today we are joined by our very own Hannah Moore, producer on The Global Story. And Hannah, you have been at CPAC UK.
Yeah, the Conservative Political Action Conference, the first one of its kind to be held in Great Britain. I've spent several days in a hot, stuffy conference room, and I'm here to hopefully enlighten you about what it was all about.
Well, we're going to get on to all of that, Hannah, and all the people that you've met along the way there. But what actually is CPAC? Like, where does it come from? What's it supposed to do?
Okay, so the Conservative Political Action Conference was founded in 1974. Ronald Reagan was one of the first speakers, and he spoke in that conference about America being a shining city on the hill. So it was about kind of American exceptionalism. And for the first few years, CPAC was this kind of grassroots event, which was about exchanging conservative ideas. So it's about bringing people together from across the movement. And it's become a barometer of who's up and who's down in the Republican Party. So they take a straw poll at the end of each event, and Donald Trump has won many, many times. CPAC has also expanded to other countries. It's been in Hungary, Poland, Brazil. And, you know, you get these big right-wing figures like Viktor Orban, the former Prime Minister of Hungary, Javier Milei, the President of Argentina. He spoke at CPAC in the US, and you remember the scene of him handing the chainsaw to Elon Musk. And saying, you know, we're going to slash state spending. So you get these kind of like set piece, big speeches from big figures across the right. And this is the first time that sort of brand is coming to the UK.
Well, the pictures that I've seen of CPAC in the United States are always of quite kind of large-scale, glitzy, flashy affairs. When you think of political events in the UK, it's more sort of urns of tea and biscuits and maybe sort of evening receptions with slightly warm white wine.
Sounds good to me.
How does the American-style political event transpose to the UK format?
So CPAC Great Britain took place at the Intercontinental Hotel near the O2, and I was there a few weeks ago to see Robin. Very different crowd for CPAC Great Britain.
I'm sure.
Far fewer short leather shorts. And this hotel is kind of grand. It has a big view looking over the city of London. So the financial district, that district of power. So there was a veneer of glamour, but you didn't have to look too deeply to see that it probably wasn't as flashy as the US events tend to be. And the event itself was taking place in the ballroom of the hotel. And one of the first things that I heard people complaining about was that the coffee cost £5 a cup.
Which is what, like approximately $7 or something like that?
Yeah, quite expensive. You know, normally you'd expect it to be free tea and coffee. The tickets for this event were being advertised on the CPAC website from £75.
Which is what, like sort of $90 approximately?
Yes, up to £10,000, which is, you know, more than $13,000.
That's a lot of money. Was anyone actually paying that amount of money?
It was very difficult to weigh up. And I think if you'd been hoping for that sort of level of glamour, you definitely weren't getting it here. So you had the sort of main ballroom space, and then you had this room of stands from sponsors such as Tally Money, which is a gold company. And then you also had a golf simulator. You know, it's this kind of like little Trumpian touches, but without the kind of big scale glamour of the US event.
Did you go on the golf simulator?
Yeah, I did.
How did it go?
My swing is very poor. I have no follow through. But the computer screen made me look like I'd done a great job.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, it was definitely there to flatter people.
So it was augmented golf?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. CPAC, very established event in the United States at this point. I mean, it has had little outposts around the world, in Hungary notably. But why is it coming to the UK, and why is it coming to the UK now?
So the woman who's brought it to the UK is called Liz Truss, and she'll be familiar to anyone in the UK. She was actually one of our prime ministers for 49 days in 2022.
One of the shortest serving prime ministers in UK history.
But she said that she wants a Trump-style revolution.
Donald Trump made a very good speech about this when King Charles came over recently and said about the Anglo-Saxon spirit that is alive and well and was developed into the American Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And yes, maybe it was because the ones that get up and go were the ones that went to America, but we are losing that spirit in Britain. I believe it is still there.
A mega movement, Make England Great Again. And I spoke to her about this. So please tell me, I know you've spoken at CPAC in the US before. You've obviously been very inspired by what's happening over there. And our listeners, a lot of them are in the US. We're really all about where the world and America meet. What made you think that that's something that needs to be brought over to Britain?
CPAC is a global movement, so I've also spoken at CPACs in Hungary and also in Australia. And what it is about is bringing together people that believe in liberty and sovereignty, but they're not necessarily affiliated to one political party. It's a movement of people who are concerned about issues like free speech, concerned about issues like migration, concerned about issues like net zero.
Her argument is that politics in the UK has been in terminal decline for decades.
What I think about Britain is the country is in serious trouble. The fact that we're on our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years shows there's a problem, and we have a problem with the overall system.
She said to me that when she looks at Donald Trump and Javier Milei in Argentina, she sees people who've come in to shake things up. She says that we have a lot in common with Donald Trump here in the UK.
Obviously, I believe in low taxes. Donald Trump believes in low taxes. He believes in a strong America, and being proud of being an American, like I am proud of being British.
Liz Truss, just to give a little bit of background without going into it too much, she basically launched what was known as the mini budget. She announced £45 billion of unfunded tax breaks. She shocked the markets and caused mortgage rates to soar. So people are still feeling some of the effects 4 years on. And since she resigned from office, she's had a kind of curious place in public life.
We can make the West great again. The status quo is not an option. Welcome to the first ever edition of the Liz Truss Show.
She has her own podcast, YouTube channel, where she often is interviewing kind of populist or alt-right figures from the US. And so you can see that with her slightly tarnished reputation in the UK, she is trying to pivot herself towards the kind of alt-right in the US.
Who are the people who attended CPAC from the United States and from elsewhere in the kind of conservative international firmament?
So you had Brad Parscale, who was Trump's campaign manager from 2018 to 2020. You had Matea Petrescu, who's a former spokesperson for Andrew and Tristan Tate. Mm-hmm. She was there to launch something called the Atlantic Strategy Institute. You had George Simeon, who's the leader of the far-right Alliance for the Union of Romanians.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends from across Europe and the free world, it is an honor to stand before you today, not as a politician who came to promise, but as a fighter who came to warn and to fight.
And he's been described by some analysts as a focal point of pro-Kremlin networks during Romania's election last year. I would say that at some point, a quarter of the room was made up of his fans who'd come over from Romania. Mm-hmm. And he spoke, and again, this was a kind of buzzword during the 3 days about replacement theory. Do you
Great
know about
replacement
this?
theory, yeah. So the idea that people of color are being brought into Western nations to change the voting composition of the electorate. Is that right?
Yeah. And he said,
Justice systems that protect the invader and punish the defender. This is not diversity. This is replacement. And the answer is not more compromises. The answer is remigration.
remigration, that is sending people back to the countries they came from. So, you know, hearing from somebody who has that kind of standpoint, very interesting when you've heard from these more sort of what have been establishment figures who are making arguments along the same lines, but I think would be careful. Even, you know, Nigel Farage would be very careful about using a term like remigration. And then from the US, you had Jack Posobiec. Now, he runs an alt-right site called Human Events, and he works for Turning Point USA, which was founded by Charlie Kirk. He has been on Megyn Kelly's show. He's been on Piers Morgan's show. He's been on Tucker Carlson's show. He's also well known for, you know, being controversial. He spread the Pizzagate conspiracy theory, and he was invited to CPAC to talk about this alternative media ecosystem that he's a real big part of. And I spoke to him. I mean, you're known for being very provocative.
Oh, not me.
And at CPAC a few years ago, you said we didn't get all the way with January the 6th. And people will have seen that quoted. What did you mean by that?
Well, I think if you actually watch the video instead of just reading the quote, you can sort of hear the inflection in my voice, and everyone in the crowd laughs.
Yeah. So you meant it purely as a joke.
I think it's self-evident.
Okay.
Well, keep in mind that the entire narrative going into that CPAC was that Donald Trump is anti-democracy, that Donald Trump is going to overturn democracy, that you are the end of democracy. So I'm twisting the words back and throwing it in the face. Welcome to the end of democracy, because that's what they had been calling us.
It was really interesting to meet Jack Posobiec because he was very, very polished. He has a good relationship with Trump, even more so with J.D. Vance. And he sort of spotted me from across the room, and he spotted me holding my BBC microphone. And he went, "Hannah!" He doesn't know me at all. And he came up and he gave me a big hug.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And even though his whole speech, and he's spoken about this often, is about the right needing to create a new media ecosystem that isn't bound by the constraints, as they would see it, of mainstream media. This is a man who is close to power and may not be a household name here, not a household name across all of the USA, but he is somebody who is certainly a rising star.
Yeah.
And I think it is that deftness of being able to play between the kind of alt-right media scene
Yes.
and speak as he would see it, I'm sure, in a sort of unfettered way,
Yeah.
and knowing how to work with the mainstream media to gain more popularity and more profile.
You know, cutting migration, defending free speech, standing up for white men and boys. Is there anything that surprised you at this event, like a kind of insurgent breath of new political thought that's coming in here, or is it kind of similar stuff that we've heard before?
Well, I think the idea for establishment figures like Liz Truss in inviting somebody like Jack Posobiec, who is younger and, as I say, has this kind of like polished energy, but really specifically appeals to young men on the right. He helps run Turning Point USA, which is attended by hundreds of thousands of young people, sometimes at their events. It's been noted that CPACs over the past few years have been less well attended than they were sort of 5-6 years ago. And perhaps that is because people are turning away from CPAC and turning towards things like Turning Point, that has this kind of younger energy and speaks to what they might term the new media. I spoke to a group of men in their early 20s. They've all got their own YouTube channels and podcasts.
My name is Jack Gordon, Jack of all trades on social media.
Right, and how old are you and where have you come from?
I'm 22 years old and I came from Amsterdam, but originally Canada.
They weren't impressed by what they'd heard at CPAC. What they told me was that this is all the same arguments. These are establishment figures, and we are the new generation.
You know, he's not catering to our crowd. He has to put up appearances and come to things like this and make an interesting speech that, being frank, boomers and older people like, because they kind of dominate conservative politics at the moment.
I mean, one of them told me that incels are going to be running the UK within a few years.
Why would you come to something like CPAC that essentially most of the speakers are establishment politicians or former politicians? How do those two things work together? Like, you're clearly interested in establishment politics, right?
Yeah, well, because we are going to become the establishments. We are going to become these people in a few years. That's why we're here. Because we're going to be speaking about things like feminism, like hypergamy, and we're going to be heard and listened to because we're incels of tremendous power. And that's why we're here. We're not niche, we're not an service. We're here to stay because we matter, and we're insisting upon our peace. That's why I'm here.
So you want to be part of the mainstream?
I'm going to literally run this country. Incels are going to run this country.
Incels are going to run the UK.
Yeah.
He introduced himself to me as an incel, and he said, basically, we're the ones in power. We're going to be in power and we're going to destroy feminism. And what you're hearing here is irrelevant. The point is that CPAC, in trying to be a sort of broad church of conservatives, had a somewhat confused feeling message. Is it for those establishment ideas? Is it for people who want to be in mainstream power, who want to speak to mainstream media? Or is it for those alt-right people who say, well, the type of controversial things that we want to say won't be featured in the mainstream?
Were there any other MAGA A-listers at the event, people who are household names in the US and around the world?
There were not. Ron DeSantis was meant to be coming.
Mm-hmm.
They announced his name several times on the second day of the conference, and he didn't turn up. The organisers say that his plane was grounded, but he would have been the biggest US name.
Well, how about Nigel Farage? Because you went to go and see Nigel Farage speaking at this event. He's kind of the star attendee. He's well known outside of Britain. He portrays himself as a good friend of Donald Trump. He's one of the favourites to become the next Prime Minister of Great Britain, if polls are to be believed. You went to go and see him speak. What was that like?
There was definitely more excitement about Nigel Farage than about any other speech at this conference.
Please welcome to the stage, leader of Reform UK and parliamentary candidate for Clacton, Nigel Farage.
The room was completely full of people, and people of all ages, which was quite interesting to see. He came out onto the stage and he has this kind of swagger in the way that he carries himself. People were immediately clapping and whooping for him.
It's a pleasure to see CPAC in what we used to call Great Britain.
And he spoke without an auto cue for about 45 minutes, which I hadn't seen any of the other speakers do. His argument was that Britain is broken, that British people have forgotten what British values are, that there is no ability for free speech in the country. And he said, we're engaged in a battle for the very soul of our nation. Our values are under attack in the most astonishing and extraordinary way. People talk a lot about Farage's charisma, and there have been local council elections in which Reform did very well recently as well. So that's why people are kind of looking at him as this maybe potential next Prime Minister. But the thing is, he's not actually a member of Parliament at the moment because he resigned his seat in Clacton in the south of the country.
In a surprise move.
In a surprise move. So in May, stories started to come out about his having accepted a £5 million donation from a crypto billionaire called Christopher Harborne.
That's almost $7 million.
Yes. And he accepted this donation before he became an MP.
Mm-hmm.
And so his argument is that he can do whatever he likes with that money. It wasn't donated to him as Nigel Farage MP. It was donated to him as Nigel Farage, citizen and leader of Reform UK.
Yes.
And his story has changed several times over the months about why he needed that £5 million. Sometimes he said he needed it for security. Sometimes he's merely said, I can spend it on what I want. He said at times I could spend it on expensive cars if I wanted to spend it on that. But this story, which Reform UK was trying to bat away as nothing, has really stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And it's led to Nigel Farage resigning his seat in what he portrays as a mainstream media smear campaign.
By the way, Americans will remember this playbook, won't they? This happened in America with lawfare being used and many, many other things. And I found myself and my colleagues being adjudged to be guilty of virtually everything, every single day.
Another figure I spoke to who'd been invited from the US, he'd flown over from Iowa, was a man called Seth Gruber.
Mm-hmm.
And he is an anti-abortion campaigner, anti-transgender campaigner, because of what he sees as his deep Christian belief. Now, what he was saying was very contentious, and I think things that you wouldn't hear at a party political conference in the UK.
All of the things that we take for granted today, like the rule of law, morality, the equality of human beings and the sexes, the sanctity of human life, you think these ideas come from the Enlightenment? You think they come from Greece and Rome? Those concepts didn't exist until Christians began to fight for those concepts, and it's created the Western civilization that we've taken for granted. And so when you rip that flower from the Christian soil that gave such flourishing and birth to it, it starts dying.
But what was interesting to me about him was the religiosity of it. And that was a theme that you definitely saw coming through the conference. And that felt very, very different to British political conferences that I've been to.
There's not a lot of religion at British political conferences, generally speaking, right?
And CPAC started with a prayer each day.
Yes. The difference, Hannah, between UK politics and US politics is so stark. What did this event at CPAC tell you about the direction that UK politics might be moving in to emulate the United States more?
Yeah. I think it would be really easy to dismiss this event as a flop. And if you read a lot of the press coverage, it's focused on how empty the ballroom was, how tepid the reception was when some of the speakers were on stage. But it's not just about how many people were in the room. It's about the kinds of ideas that they were bringing forth about British identity, about outsiders, migrants, as being a threat to British values, British Christian values. And I think what was most interesting to me is stylistically what this CPAC was trying to learn from the US. The mainstream right in the UK is at an inflection point. The Conservative government, after 14 years, is out of power. And I think they're trying to work out what they represent now. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Liz Truss is doing is looking to the US, where politics is done in a bolder, shinier way, where there's a concept that free speech and sometimes controversial speech is allowed on the right. And what she really wants to do, and was trying to prove, I think, with CPAC Great Britain, is that there's a verve and an energy and something that UK politics can learn from the US and the way in which people present themselves on the right.
Okay, so at this event, it sounds like a lot of the people there were insiders. I mean, you talked about a lot of young men in suits who were there attending, who were already involved in this side of the political scene. If you're not getting actual voters to attend an event like this, who are energized by the political project on offer, does that tell us something about maybe the levels of enthusiasm for MAGA-style politics in the UK?
Well, I spoke to a lot of people at the conference about their views on Donald Trump, and I can't say that anybody was really jumping with excitement about him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just as a kind of like anecdotal snapshot bears out where he is in the polling, the mainstream political parties in the UK are definitely feeling the threat of Nigel Farage and reform, not just because his ideas are speaking to parts of the population who feel they've been unheard, but also because his flashy, gregarious style, his speaking off the cuff, not using an auto cue, speaking directly to members of the audience, that Trumpian style, it does play well. And I saw that in the room.
But the idea that the MAGA right is a political steamroller, which is preparing to take over not just the UK, but the whole European continent writ large, the evidence that you've seen at this event would suggest that maybe there is some way to go before that steamroller theory is actually proven.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was great.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here on the other side of the glass.
That was Hannah Moore, senior journalist here on the team at The Global Story. We're also an audio podcast. We're available every weekday on bbc.com or wherever you get your favourite podcasts. That's it from us for today. We'll be back again tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Cheerio.